So this morning I'm going to kind of continue on a new series that just started 2 months ago, my first talk in the new series, kind of looking at what is in the traditions is called the left-hand path, right? So the path of experience. And taking a look at that and what value does that bring us in our own spiritual journey, in our journey towards self-awareness, self-understanding, realization of, actualization of more of our potential, right? Bringing more of what we could be into this life and living it. And for all of the years that I've spoken here and most of the years that I've taught, I've really stayed on what's called the right-hand path, right? The path of transcendence. Right? So the path, the practices that lead us beyond, as opposed to the left-hand path, path of experience, which takes us into. Right? So the traditional transcendental path is the path beyond apparent experience, right, to source itself. The idea being that with the right practices, one can move in one leap from the realm of experience to the realm beyond experience. And that is the advocacy and the cautionary tale of the right-hand path. That is the appropriate and most expedient way. So the left-hand path would have a different take on that and would say, no, indeed, that can happen, but when you get there, you're still kind of a knucklehead, and you've got to come back and do the path of experience anyways. So why not just start with the path of experience, right? Why be an enlightened fool? What good are you? What we want is people who are enlightened in the realm of experience. Right? And so I've recently, or about to embark on a course with a group of my students going deep into this. And so it is brought to the fore in my own experience, this idea and reminding myself of my own time traveling on the path of experience. So I'll probably move back and forth a little bit between the two, kind of using the right-hand path, the most available, most conventionally available paths that we find, right? If we go out into the cities and we look for centers that are offering teachings, mostly what we will find is the right-hand path, the path of transcendence. It's harder to find the path of experience. And one of the graces of Lake Harriet is that it has been a place that has held for both. It has allowed the right-hand path and the left-hand path to kind of coexist in the same space, which is somewhat rare. So it is probably for all of you less unfamiliar to think about, right? It's within your realm of experience, but for many, this idea of the path of experience is foreign because we're mostly conventionally in our religious and spiritual opportunities given the teaching of the right-hand path, and the right-hand path pretty exclusively rejects the left-hand path, right? It sequesters it, has all kinds of things to say about it as being. So if we stepped into kind of a more Christian motif for a moment, we might say that it's evil, right? That it is sin, right? It is the path of the body. It includes in it pleasure, right? And so we can all probably have some sense of the general Christian take on the body and pleasure as being not good and things we should get over, right? And so that's the general holding of the left-hand path. And let's say there's a kernel of wisdom in that, right? But what has been made into is wholly unhelpful and has, I think, created a prejudice. Certainly within the teaching and potentially within ourselves. I mean, we may all be holding that in that we've been encultured with that as a belief system that's been conveyed to us. If not in an obvious way, it is the implicit teaching. So kind of approaching the left-hand path, those are some of the things that we encounter is the barriers that have been already set up consciously or unconsciously. And part of the path is dismantling those, finding them, and then dismantling them. So I'm going to talk a little bit about just the basis of the path of experience. Right? So this thing, experience. So what's to be said about experience? So in some ways, it's so fundamental, it's hard to talk about directly. Right? So I'll take a few steps away, talk about it by some of its byproducts, and then work our way back. Right? So one of the things we could say comes from experience is information. And out of information, we make knowledge. Right? That probably makes simple sense. Right? And what has happened for most of us today in our modern world is what we're familiar with, what we connect with, is knowledge. Right? It's the accumulated knowledge. Ours through school, right? However it has come to us, right? We're inundated with it, again, kind of culturally. We're continually kind of producing knowledge. And to make a difference between information and knowledge, and in some ways information is potential knowledge. Right? What we call knowledge is when we've separated out kind of, signal from noise. When there's all of this information and we extract something out of it that becomes meaningful and helpful, that helps us to kind of navigate the world, right? Then we call that knowledge. And for the most part, what we do with knowledge is we store it. Right? In more modern times, and say modern, I mean a few thousand years, we write it down. Right? And we have these large collections of knowledge, libraries. And we have places of education that mostly take a person and introduce them to the storehouse of knowledge. Right? And so for most of us, whether our education has just been through family, society, high school, and for some on to post-secondary, maybe your PhD. But if we look at it, most of what we call our knowledge is just that. It's the stored knowledge. Right? So what we have a tendency to do is then we take our experience, and what we extract out of it is that which is congruent with our already existing knowledge base. So our knowledge is as helpful, as imperative as it is to have, becomes a limitation. It becomes a constraint on our ability to use our experience. Right? And so the value in talking about experience is really to say that. Right? To understand that happens. Right? That as much as I might say in any moment, like, I'm having my experience, well, that's not really true if we look at it. I'm having a small section of my experience. And what's defining that is my previous learning. Right? And then that learning has been, reified, right, into beliefs. Right? And these beliefs are deep. They're not things that if I asked you, you would tell me. The things you can tell me are superficial beliefs. Right? These are probably more like things that you think you believe rather than things that you actually believe. Right? So if we've done a lot of inner work, we might have mined a few of our core beliefs that were previously unconscious to us. But there are many, many more. Right? So it's important in this process as one embarks on the left-hand path to understand this kind of fundamental structuring in our relationship to our experience. So if we're going to make the choice of making our experience our path, then we need to understand our relationship between ourself and our path and how much we constrain it. The potential that exists in our moment-to-moment experience and just our mundane experience, there is far more potential in that than what we realize moment to moment. And the constraint is our past learning. So I'll come back and say more about experience itself in a moment, but now I want to talk a little bit more about the experiencer. Right? So again, we have experience, in some sense of experience exists out there, the world, experience. And then there's an I who come into relationship with the world, and this is the relationship that I'm talking about. There's experience, there's an experiencer. And one of the things we know about the experiencer is that the experiencer is patterned, is constrained. Right? That limits what we are able to take in from all of the possibilities. So as I was kind of pondering this talk, I was thinking how to create an example of this, and one of the most obvious ones, I didn't have to look very far, was this, right? So whether it's a phone or a tablet or a computer, all of us, likely all of us, at some point during the day or the week, go to the internet, right? And so there's a good chance that you use Google, or if not, you use something else. But you have a browser, right, between you and the internet. So looking around the room, I'm thinking, I don't want to prematurely age anyone, so I apologize. But I'm looking around the room and I'm thinking most of us were around pre-internet, right? So we saw it coming into existence, right? And I know for myself, I was right there kind of as it was emerging and excited about it and had no idea clearly of what it was to become, but it had my attention. But in the early days, right, before the internet was really what we know of as the internet, what didn't exist yet was a browser, right? There was no way to navigate this growing connection of hubs of information. So you could kind of go out and go exploring, but I mean, you had no way. Like, you were just kind of stumbling in the cyber darkness, and maybe you would find breadcrumbs led by somebody else, and left by somebody else, and that would lead you someplace, and that was interesting. But it became very clear early on in the emergence of the internet that what was needed was a way to navigate it. Right? And so came along the web browser. Right? And what we've seen today, and if you pay much attention to you don't even have to go all that alternative. You can find some of it in the mainstream. But if you step a little outside of the mainstream, you'll hear quite a bit of talk now about the constraint that is happening within search engines, right? And how certain information is being promoted and other information is being constrained. Right? And there are some people that are upset about that. So in a certain way, I mean, it's no different, right? All we've done is reproduce a version of ourself, right? So we do that already, right? So I can understand the being upset because we don't want to know that Google is keeping certain things from us, right? But really, we should bring the argument closer to home and look at our own search engine and recognize that we're already doing that to ourselves. We're already, editing out a whole area of information that we have decided we don't want to take in, and so we don't. Right? So we're seeing the same thing happen. Right? We're just instantiating our own conventional consciousness in technology. So no surprise that this is happening. Right? So we can very much think of your device and your browser as a gateway into the internet, right? In this own process of yourself. You as the experiencer, approaching experience. Right? That experience, like the internet, holds a vast storehouse of information. And some of what you need is a way to navigate that. Right? You need a way to navigate the utterly overwhelming collection of information that is held within existence itself. How are we going to do that? To make it of any value, we need a browser. We need a way to move through it in an organized fashion and extract what will be helpful for us and constrain what will be confusing. Yeah. So this brings us back to a place where both the left-hand path and the right-hand path have a common conundrum, right? And that is around the experiencer. Right? And the patterning and limitation of the experiencer as being part of the problem that needs to be solved. So another example came to mind as I was pondering this. So I have the good fortune to be a grandfather and spending time, not nearly enough time, with my two grandsons and watching them. They're both, just a little under 2, but right at that cusp of 2. And one of the things you can see at that age is whatever they're doing, like that's their world, right? So if they're playing with a toy, that experience and that toy are their world. And, we come along and it's nap time, right? And so the toy has to go away. Well, sometimes that doesn't go well. And there's a holy terror of a fit, right? When you take away the toy. And all of a sudden, this little bubble of happiness and joy and mom or dad and grandma, grandpa, whoever's there kind of doing the caretaking role, is included in that, is part of the bubble of joy and happiness. But boy, you take away the toy and all of a sudden you are the enemy, right? Like one of my grandsons just smacked his mom in the face the other day. I mean, it was it's not funny, but as grandparents, that is part of the fun, right? Seeing your kids go through what you went through with them. So there's a little bit of that, but it was more just the raw expression, right, of anger and even hatred, right? Like this sense of like, I will kill you, I will eliminate you, like you're breaking up my fun, I will kill you, right? Like that's the sense in there. And, and it's fine, right? You make the transition and then that's the thing, right? And then it's nap time and then it's wake up from nap time and then that's a tantrum. And then it goes on through the day, right? So we can look at that and, kind of smile and laugh and perhaps we've had the opportunity to bear witness to that in children around us. But in many ways, the traditions tells us that we're no different than that. Right? As much as we are no longer infants in the sense of this life, in the sense of existence, we act like infants. And that for many of us, not all of us, but for many of us, and all of us were there at some point, even if we're not completely there now. So maybe this is a moment of recognition in the here and now, and maybe it's a reflection on who you were at some point in time. But most of us have spent time thinking that this life, that what I apprehend through my five senses, and if we add a sixth sense and call it the mind, right? Just conventional thinking mind without being too grand about it, right? So through our sixth senses, what we apprehend, we take to be the extent of existence, reality. Like that is the bubble, right, that we form. This lifetime, physical reality, that's it, right? That's my grandson playing with his ball. That's his entire reality right there. For us, reality's gotten a bit bigger, but the fact of it being bounded, right, and that we are convinced that that's the case, that hasn't changed, right? And so what happens when, say, a practice comes along that threatens to take away your toy? Right? Many of us will have a tantrum, and we will go into an I hate you and reject it and want it to go away, right? Try and kill it. So we can say of many of the authentic traditions, the practices would offer us this opportunity, and in particular the left-hand path, because it has a potency in this way that the right-hand path doesn't, then in many ways this is what we've done to it, right? We've tried to drum it out of existence, make it go away, avoid contact with it, right, so that I can maintain my bubble. Right? So for most of us, we're fairly kind of gross realm. We're materially oriented, right? We're concerned about the lower levels of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Kind of food and shelter and modern day versions of that, right? That makes up most of what we value and spend our time securing and tending to, right? And then, but also deriving our sense of value, purpose, meaning, pleasure from that. And then on the flip side, our suffering very much comes from a threat to that. Right? So, we could say that we're very much tethered to the pleasure principle, right? Seek pleasure, avoid pain. And pleasure equals kind of having those creature comforts associated with the gross realm in this life. So, that describes, I think, certainly myself, probably most of us in this room, have that as a primary orientation. What the traditions would tell us is that that model is too limited. Right? That there is more to existence than the gross realm, right? The mere material. Now some of us might have expanded that a little bit to the not so material, like to the etheric, the energetic, right? So we've expanded that, but we probably have a similar relationship to it, which is I'm happy when I'm getting it, and I'm not happy when I'm not getting it. Like my sense of pleasure is when I have what I want, and my suffering is when my object of pleasure is threatened. Right? So that hasn't changed even if we've expanded our bubble a little bit. Right? The traditions would say that the bubble goes further, right, into kind of an infinite realm of experience, on an infinite level and of infinite variety that is utterly unimaginable. But if we bring to that, if all we do is expand the realm of our experience, but we don't change like the fundamental orientation to it, then really nothing has changed. Right? If we still stay in that place of the pleasure principle, right, then we have the same problem, just in a bigger area. We're still the child who gets upset when our ball is taken away, only our playground and playtime has gotten bigger. Right? So this is the core of both paths is what needs to change is that fundamental orientation. And so the left-hand path is not in and of itself a solution to that, right? But what it offers is a set of practices that create a potent opportunity to see that structure and begin to disassemble it. And that's, again, whichever path we take, that's still the same. The patterned self is the problem, right? And what needs to go is the patterning. And so the path of experience just shows us that patterning in a different way, right? In a more acute and more proximate way. And so how might that happen? Right? So we can think of, again, in the path of experience, if we think about just having more conventional experience, right? And this is an honest to goodness path that you will find teachers dedicated to, books dedicated to, centers dedicated to, of taking something conventional, let's say food, and just going into food, the potential experience related to food, fully and completely, right? Like, try eating nothing for as long as you can and see how that goes. Try eating everything for as much as you can for as long as you can and see how that goes, right? This is the way the path goes. It's like pick an experience and now find all of the different ways you can have a relationship to it and see how it goes. Find out what you learn, right? Now that's the healthy form, arguably healthy, but that approach, as opposed to a lesser approach, which is to say, this is the relationship to food that you should have. Now go and enact this relationship perfectly. Right? That's not the left-hand path. Right? That's telling you how to have a relationship with experience. The path of experience is really one of says, just go and have experience. Have as much of it as you can and learn something in the process. Right? That the what you need to know will come in the process of engaging. Kind of doesn't matter what you engage with. Right? But it is also true that the traditions tell us if we look for experiences that are on the outer limits of our conception of reality, right? So if we find our outer edge and we seek experience there, that the process of kind of breaking our bubble will be quickened. Right? So now this is, you have to be the person who actually wants their bubble broken. Right? That's essential in this process. Right? If you don't, then you won't go to the edge and find those experiences. You'll stay more in the center and find things that just confirm your experience, right? That solidify your bubble, but entertain you. So the traditions say that you have to find the place you don't want to go, the place of maximal discomfort, and then that's where you go. Right? And you go there fully and completely, without reservation. And you'll learn something. And in that process, if you're lucky, your bubble will break. And if you're really lucky, somebody will be around to pick up the pieces and put you back together again in a way that you no longer have a bubble. Right? But that's the risk. Right? That's the risk of the path of experience. Is it's really hard on us. It challenges us. It takes us into the places we don't want to go. And sometimes we don't want to go there for good reasons for our conventional self. Right? But we're explicitly challenging that, right, in the path. So it can be distressing. It's distressing for the self, and it can certainly be distressing for the people around you. So what might this be, right? So dreaming often is used as a place to practice the left-hand path. It's a fairly accessible thing. Most of us do it most nights, so it's not that exotic. But with some practice, we can learn how to be conscious in our dreams, right? Lucid dreaming, not that unfamiliar, right, in this place. But coming, to having an authentic lucid dreaming practice, and going into the dream state, and in the dream state, pressing the boundaries of your limitations in that realm. Right? So there's a potent practice, right, that can have all kinds of impacts of kind of shattering your conventional self-belief on what reality is. And that's ultimately the goal. Right? The goal is to change that sense of the sense of limit. Right? Because what does that do? That limiting sense of self? It limits our ability to derive knowledge from experience. So the more we can change that, the more knowledge we can gain from the experience that we already have. Right? And that's the great gift, is that as this process happens, as it begins to unfold for us, we find out we don't actually need to go seeking exotic experiences. We don't need to take psychedelic substances to be catapulted into altered states and have radical experiences. Right? That can be a short-term practice that serves a need. But once that process is underway, what we find out is that experience is utterly here all the time. Like it's happening right now. The only limit is our ability to derive knowledge from it, to be in relationship with it. Right? So the practice is merely about taking away the limit, but it isn't about going someplace else, being someone else, having some exotic experience. So cracking the shell so that the experience that you're having right now becomes available to you. So I want to take some time to have you do some exercises to kind of explore this for yourself. And if all goes well in the exercises, what the exercises will do is bump you into some of your structure, right? Some of your patterning, some of the limiting self that has been constructed. And we actually want to do that, right? So that's the idea of the exercise is have a happy accident to encounter some of your own limiting structure and take account of it, right? So what you're going to do is you're going to get into groups of two, and you're going to sit across from each other in kind of a socially comfortable distance, but a way that you're going to be asking questions of one another. So you want to be able to hear each other in a quiet voice. And the exercise goes like this. One person will be the person asking the question, the other person will be answering. You'll ask the question, your partner will answer, you'll say thank you, you'll ask them again. They'll answer, you'll say thank you, you'll ask them again. Timer will go off, I'll ask you to switch. The other person will ask you the question. You'll answer, they'll say thank you, they'll ask you again, you'll answer. And so for 2 minutes, somebody's going to ask you a question, same question, again and again and again. And the goal really is to just let that question open you up, to just let whatever comes out of you come out of you. Right? Now there will be the social self will be there doing its constraints around what's appropriate to say and what would this person think of me, and the performing self will be there to feel what's the right answer, what's a good answer, what's the best answer, right? And then kind of our, the anarchist will be there, how can I hack the question? How can I come up with some, kind of paradigm transcending take on this question and, be really crafty, and maybe the other person will think I'm really smart. And, so all of that, right? All of that will be there. Of course it will be. But your job is to just notice, like, yep, that's all happening. No problem. And just answer with whatever comes up. And if we allow the process to happen, something interesting will arise. Yep. Always does. So, go ahead and get into your groups, and then I'll give you the question. And if you have something to write it down, you can write it down. If you have... Tell me an experience you avoid. Tell me an experience you avoid. And then again, your partner's going to ask you, tell me an experience you avoid, and you're going to say broccoli. Thank you. Tell me an experience you avoid. Pain. Thank you. Tell me an experience you avoid. My mother-in-law. Thank you. On and on. So just whatever comes up, just let that be your answer. And this is a whole full body contemplation. Sensing, feeling, listening to your body, right, to your internal organs, to your nervous system, to the space around you, to the space in the room, to your mind, to your history, to your imagination. You're opening the field of experience to all possible inputs and letting whatever arises come out as an answer, and be willing to be surprised by it. Yeah? Easy enough.